Under
Why?
whose authority are you not issuing
God's
licenses?
authority.
Did lawyers tell you?
I don't
Did
believe
God
in your
tell you
God.
to do this? Did God
I
tell
don't
you
believe
to
in
treat
your God.
us?
I don't
like
believe in your
this?
I've
God.
asked you all to leave. You are interrupting my
You can tell the
business.
police.
Well, someone finally took the spotlight from Donald Trump this week. Kim Davis, a county clerk in Kentucky, defied a court order to issue marriage licenses to same-sex couples and went to jail. Time to bring in our Sunday group. Syndicated columnist George Will, Susan Page, Washington bureau chief of USA Today, Robert Costa from the Washington Post, and New York Times best-selling author Richard North Patterson has written thrillers on a range of topics, including politics and the Supreme Court. Well, that clerk, Kim Davis, says that God's law outweighs man's law, the Supreme Court ruling on same-sex marriage, and a number of Republican presidential candidates, including Ted Cruz and Rand Paul and Mike Huckabee, jumped on her bandwagon. George, your thoughts about the principle and politics of the rule of law, and also what about Barack Obama, who seems to sometimes pick and choose which laws he's going to enforce?
Well, there's no question that the president's selective interpretation of the constitutional provision that the executive shall see that the laws are faithfully executed. His selective approach to that perhaps has encouraged a kind of lawlessness down the ballot. People saying, well, I can do whatever I wish. But surely it is a wholesome rule that executives should obey legitimate court orders. That's true whether your name is Orville Faubus, the Democratic governor of Arkansas in the 1950s, or George Wallace, the Democratic governor of Alabama in the 1960s, or Kim Davis, the Democratic county clerk in Kentucky. She made a choice. Unquestionably, her faith is important to her. Evidently, her paycheck is also, because she did not resign her office. We've been here before, Chris. In 1892, a Massachusetts policeman claimed that his constitutional rights of speech and association had been violated by rules governing and restricting political activity by police. The Supreme Judicial Court of Massachusetts held against him. In an opinion written by a Massachusetts judge named Oliver Wendell Holmes, he ruled, he said, the policeman has a constitutional right to engage in politics. The policeman does not have a constitutional right to be a policeman. She has that same problem.
Rick, as we've been following this story, I keep thinking that Kim Davis could be a character in one of your novels, sworn to uphold the law, but arguing that there's a higher law.
Well, I think the problem here is that George is exactly right. This is no different than her turning down an interracial couple on religious grounds. It's a public official simply doesn't have the right to do it. The real problem, I think, is a matter of parochial primary politics. This one revivifies the controversy which the Supreme Court protected the GOP from by ruling in favor of gay rights. Now Kim Davis has thrown them back in the briar patch. And it separates the people who are willing to be grown-ups about this from the folks who are seeking out parochial political advantage in Iowa among evangelicals. The problem is that's not where the American people are as a general election proposition. So the GOP should hope this goes away as quickly as possible.
Well, let's talk about the GOP, and let's turn to Donald Trump, who this week finally signed a loyalty oath pledging that he'll support the Republican nominee and not run as an independent candidate. Here's a clip.
I will be totally pledging my allegiance to the Republican Party and the conservative principles for which it stands.
But there's a question, Robert. Did the Republicans win or lose by, in a sense, with the RNC chairman, Reince Priebus, flying up to New York, going to the Trump Tower, seeming to formally take Donald Trump into the GOP?
It's a political chess game. On one side, the RNC is trying to bring Trump into the tent to make sure he's not going to be a threat for a third-party run. At the same time, I've spoken to Trump and his campaign manager about this. They believe long-term they can get other Republicans to commit to him to be boxed in as much as he is boxed in with this pledge should he be the nominee. He thinks because of his standing in the polls, he needs to now start making a move in case he actually does win the nomination, people stick with him.
But there's another aspect of it, Bob, and that is that to a certain degree he was the outsider. He was, you know, the maverick, but now with his signing the pledge and having had the laying on of hands of Reince Priebus, does the GOP own his policies, his statements more than they did?
Well, they do certainly own Trump more because Priebus went up to New York and associated with Trump. Priebus didn't appear with Trump at the press conference. At the same time, the RNC is trying to get a hold of this situation, this phenomenon. When you see Carson's rise, Trump's rise, Carly Fiorina, all these outsider voices are becoming a major part of the party, and the institutional GOP is grappling with exactly what to do, but they don't have many tools to control. This was one of them. It's just a political document.
Meanwhile, Hillary Clinton's email problems continue. She refused this week to say she was sorry for what had happened, refused to apologize, but she did say this.
There was so much work to be done. We had so many problems around the world. I didn't really stop and think, what kind of email system will there be? I am sorry that this has been confusing to people and has raised a lot of questions.
And we got a lot of questions from you about the decision of a State Department staffer whom Hillary Clinton paid to help set up her email server, a private email server in Chappaqua, New York. His decision, his announcement that he is going to take the Fifth Amendment in all investigations of this. And you can see, here's one of the questions. Phil Mayfield sent this on Facebook. If the panel offers immunity to that staffer, can the aide be compelled to testify or risk being charged with contempt of Congress? Susan, how do you answer, Phil?
Absolutely. If they offer him immunity, he doesn't have a Fifth Amendment right not to testify. He will be forced to testify. I assume he would testify in that case as opposed to going to jail. And Richard, you talked about being thrown back into the briar patch when it comes to gay marriage. Hillary Clinton cannot get out of the briar patch that is this email controversy. And one thing that was especially, I think, unpersuasive about her answer in the clip that you just showed was if she had not had time to think through her email system, wouldn't she have just used the State Department system that was in place? This is a controversy that is not going away. It's going to be here for months, and it is costing her dearly in two ways: in her reputation as an honest and trustworthy person, but also in her ability to talk about some other issue.
And what do you think about the fact that this fellow Brian Pagliano says that he's going to take the Fifth? Hillary Clinton saying there's nothing wrong, there's nothing unethical, there's nothing improper, certainly nothing illegal, and here's a guy who's taking the Fifth against self-incrimination.
And we discovered just yesterday, I think with a Washington Post story, that he was being paid personally by the Clintons to maintain this email server, something that we didn't know before. Now, maybe there's nothing wrong with that, but it's an example of exactly the opposite of what you're supposed to do when you face a political problem like this. Rule number one, get the whole story out there, deal with it, say you're sorry, maybe you apologize, and move on. And Hillary Clinton has failed to do those very basic kind of political 101 steps on this controversy.
George, we seem to sort of give a temperature here every week. Is Hillary Clinton in better or worse shape on the email scandal at the end of this week?
Oh, worse, because now they're paying this person absent-mindedly. I mean, she's saying, well, I was so caught up in fixing relations with Russia and Libya and all the rest that I absent-mindedly set up an alternative email system. It doesn't pass the laugh test.
If she's so crippled, though, politically by this, I just wonder, where is Vice President Biden? He's still on the sidelines. You have a lot of Democrats, Senator Sanders, Governor O'Malley, resistant to take negative shots at Secretary Clinton. You still have a Democratic Party, for all her struggles, is pretty much behind her, and people are reluctant to get in and really make that a battle.
So, I mean, what are you saying then? I mean, in terms of her stand-up?
I'm saying this is an issue perhaps more for, when I talk to Republican campaigns, they say this is going to be an issue in the general election. We feel like we're seizing on this more. They think with the Benghazi hearings, they will do even more. But with the Democrats, when you're on the trail and you're in Iowa and New Hampshire, Democrats are still not really thinking this is a big issue for her.
Rick, we're friends from Martha's Vineyard, that bastion of liberalism. What are your friends saying about Hillary Clinton and this email thing? Is it just a vast right-wing conspiracy?
Well, I think what Robert says is right. I think it's a general election problem. She's very solid in the Democratic base, among women, among labor, among minorities, everyone but white progressives. And as Gene McCarthy and George McGovern learned, white progressives aren't enough. So I think Robert is correct. This is a general election problem. And whatever else, it plays in the problem of perception, like Dan Quayle not being able to spell potato. This plays in the trope of her opponents that she's entitled and untrustworthy, and that's a difficulty.
And then there's also the FBI investigation, which might take on a whole life of its own. All right, we have to take a break here. We'll see you all a little bit later.